Michelle, what can you tell me about college prestige?
Hey, Mattie. Well, we're going to talk a lot about college prestige today, and especially why is everyone so obsessed with it? Why do college rankings hold so much power in determining college prestige? And also, does getting into an elite college really mean your future is all set?
It's probably the number one biggest topic in all of college admissions discourse. I'm excited to handle it. Let's go.
All right. Okay, so the first thing we should talk about is like, how do we actually define prestige in higher education? I kind of was like Googling around, trying to find like different definitions. The one that I settled on is from this book, Jeffrey Salingo, Who Gets In and Why. So he defines prestige basically as just selectivity. So an elite college is exclusively defined by how hard it is to get into. So I'm curious, like, how do you define it?
I think that's a fair description. In that, so I have my own prestige rankings, if you will. I brought it up multiple times. It's my nuclear launch codes, and I don't know if it what the correlation causation is of this chart. However, one whenever I basically ranked every school in America by its in a tiers at least. Really, it's ranked by prestige. And you can see it, I'll have Charlene pop it up again. Yeah, it's like Harvard, Princeton, MIT, Caltech, Stanford, Wharton, Yale, and Columbia. They're in the top tier of prestige in American schools. Then there's
Okay.
in the second tier is Duke, Penn, Brown, Dartmouth, Hopkins, Chicago, Northwestern, Vanderbilt. That's the second tier. And third tier is Notre Dame, Cornell, USC, Rice, Carnegie Mellon, Georgetown, Berkeley, UCLA. Right?
Hmm.
Um, I don't know the correlation causation. This is almost identical to my list of how difficult it is to get into every school here.
Oh, okay.
Certainly within the tiers that's probably closer to what I really use this for when I'm showing it to potential students or just looking at myself. I believe it is notably more difficult to get into Columbia, Yale, Wharton, Stanford, Caltech, MIT, Princeton, Harvard. It is to get into that's like Duke is at the top of the second tier. Like it's probably the closest. But they're tiered for a reason.
Right.
I believe it's easier getting to Duke than Vanderbilt, but they're in the same range. So you tell me what chicken or the egg when I'm looking at it. It's like I don't know if this is. That's why I think it's a fair comparison.
Yeah.
I think the exact same rankings of how difficult I personally have found or believe they are perfectly matches the rank. Yeah, it could be the exact same description of this list of schools why they're there. Um, so yeah, you mentioned the book, like Who Gets It and Why.
I didn't get this book just for this podcast. I actually already
No,
had
no,
it in my library.
I'm not. I refer to that. I used to call that book "Who Gets Into Emory and Why," because it's Emory and then two other schools that are like 60-70% admissions. I'm like, and anyone who's ever read that book has exclusively given two S's about the Emory sections. Like you don't care who gets. If it's Davidson College, or something. But then, but then I had my own. I have receipts, as I've been saying in the last episode or two. Who gets into Emory and why? Everyone, because it's not that hard. And that book's Achilles heel is I've just had too many gosh darn students get into Emory from too many states for too many reasons. Like we're talking like a 90-95% plus clip here of
Right,
Emory,
right.
and then none of them ever go except the one girl who
The one, yes.
the one girl we kind of YOLO'd the ED because she had like a 3.7 and the pre-med program seems like
Hmm.
real strong. That's the one girl who actually went to Emory, and even then she wanted to go to NYU. We're like, nah, Emory's probably a better bet on the ED front.
Right.
So that's my thoughts on Who Gets It and Why by Jeff Salingo. I'm sure there's some great information in it, but it hasn't quite. Anywho, yes,
But your
I
definitions of prestige are very close.
yeah, I'll often be. I really call it prestige. I think even the email where I told you I want to do this episode, I put prestige in all caps, and I often
Yes,
put
yeah.
I put an asterisk on each side, or like put a space in between. It's like manifest, it's like an internet word at this point. Yeah, the definition of it. Yeah, if I'd been challenged to have one, I would say the perceived notion of how, yeah, like it would. His is I like his. It's not what I think. It's the perceived notion of the inherent value of attending a school in its own merit, based on the strength and the selectivity of the school itself. I suppose. Um,
Right.
yeah, I like his. I guess I don't really. It's like manifest. Like yeah, I don't know if I'd have a definition almost by purpose because prestige kind of means whatever you want it to be. It's like how good is it?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, isn't it kind of unnerving that it's like this huge decision that you're making on where to apply to colleges is based on like perception. We're not talking about like educational quality or anything. So doesn't this kind of sound like brand name shopping?
Yeah, and that's what we're gonna get to a lot of this is that in a TikTok I released that everyone got mad about. I basically talked
Uh-oh.
about like we were talking about the future of schools, like their roots, and I was talking about computer science, like that I believe computer science was going to drive forward. Certain schools, the value of a CS degree would be perceived as better or worse, you know.
Right.
And a lot of the comments were basically saying is like that's foolish. They're all very good. You know, this is and I sit there and be like, right. It doesn't matter how good the actual piece of paper. It doesn't matter necessarily like what actually happens with it or even necessarily. Look, it matters more what actual companies think, and I
Hmm.
believe that a company is going to pick a Cornell CS graduate over a otherwise identical University of Michigan graduate. I just do. I don't know, like, and that's prestige right there. Even more importantly, I absolutely believe that a nervous family that wants the best for their children has the resources is going to send their child to Cornell computer science instead of Michigan computer science. Um, especially given like yeah, even within Michigan in many cases, even though it's a lot more expensive. That is what prestige means to me. It is actually about consumer behavior. Like
Hmm.
the actual schools, and you're right, that is branding. That is marketing. Like it doesn't matter. Like what doesn't matter is what actually happens the 4 years you were there. I also think I don't put a ton of weight in like the connections aspect of prestige. I always think it's weird that a lot of people discuss it, but it's about the connections you make. Like, no, it's not. Like, I don't know. You go to school for these things, and like it's about that's what makes it branding and marketing kind of silly. Is like I don't. It's about whatever the person who's going to be actually about the actual families and the students going there, what they care about, and right. But the actual school itself is mostly irrelevant, but not entirely, because I do believe that a Cornell computer science degree is a great education, probably better than you're going to be able to get at Tulane or Georgetown or like another school. Like that's what makes it extra complicated, because I do in my core believe that the more elite schools in the country are better sources of education in general than those that are less prestigious, and if only because they have way more money. Maybe I don't know. It's like they have way more money and they have way more access. Like that's what I often tell
Okay.
students: is that an MIT or a Cornell or a Harvard, they are able to gain access to speakers and opportunities and guest lecturers and all that stuff. And again, that's also because they have way more money. But like that kind of stuff does matter to me. But it matters way, 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 way less than what family. Like that's not what families really care about either.
I
I
was
don't
going to
think.
say, are they really looking at Cornell's, like what kind of classes do they have opportunities when, I mean,
No, and that's why the irony is like that's what we do. Like it's like no, it's not like do not write about prestige in your college essay,
yes,
students.
exactly.
And it's like yeah, it's part of like the silly game of this is playing and yeah, and we've had enough students. Is the majority of our students they want to go to a prestigious school? I would say that like by objective metrics, whatever prestige, top 20, top 10, we use that term. The vast, 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 vast majority of students that we work with, they may have like a school they really like. It'd be a Yale or a Stanford and a lot of them are like keen with Berkeley, UCLA. But at the end of the day, they show up, and it's not just their parents. Like that's going to be a big part. It's not just parents driving this. Like it's the actual
Hmm.
students we work with, and I get to know them very well. Their biggest goal is to attend basically a prestigious school that they are happy to attend. That usually, but not always, is good for their major. That's probably like what
Okay.
they. That is, I think, yeah, like that is probably the best way I can describe the way they see the process. They're usually a lot more flexible about what that school might be, but also like if they don't get in attended one of those, that's a problem, and that's also
Hmm.
why they are paying quite a bit of money to work with people like us, because we're trying to ensure that for them. And some of that's going to be biased because that's what I recruit for.
Right.
No shock, I make podcasts like this and explain my philosophy. I'm going to get students who match that philosophy, but I don't think that I am. So I often feel like the types I work with is very common. The student who has done everything else. They have the grades and the SATs, and they're like their real goal is yeah, they might have like a dream school, but more so is like they've put the effort in. They want to go up the ladder as high as possible.
Okay. Yeah. And so I'm curious, since you started consulting, do you think like the pressure of trying to get into an elite college, has it gotten better or worse through your career?
Like for me personally, or for the students I work with, like how they feel.
Yeah, like the parental pressure or for like the kids.
It stayed mostly the same. I I'm never going to subscribe that college admissions has radically shifted. I just did. There's an episode I guess coming after this about computers. Like there have been changes in the game, but and a lot of it is I graduated in 2009 and like it was all this was the game in 2009. You know, it
Hmm.
was like I didn't get to play it because my GPA wasn't good enough. But yeah, that's part of like my cornerstone of my thought process is that I was basically an affluent high school student going to an elite private high school in the late 2000s trying to get into schools, and I knew how that what that felt like, and I knew the stress that was placed upon me, and I also knew that I didn't resent anyone for putting that stress on me as well. Like it could be hard on me, but I was not like why is everyone being so mean to me? Like I wanted to get into a good school too. My dad went to Penn. I wanted to go to like him. And then
Mm,
that fell apart quickly. Then I wanted to go to USC. USC seemed like a cool school. I really liked it. But then my GPA wasn't good enough and I didn't get in. And like that hurt. That and every step of the way I remember like playing the game. And it was a
right.
different game and I wasn't as good at it, but I was doing sports I didn't care about because I thought it would be good for my and then I also remember every step of the way, like random teachers or people basically telling me that I was an idiot for thinking this way.
Oh man.
Yeah, well, there's going to be students here that's be like, "Oh my god, this guy is just like me." Where it's the teacher who would say like, "I don't know," like I remember there's a teacher that wouldn't let me take the honors version of her class because it was like too much work, and I had to have my parents fight for me to take the harder version of the class. And this is
Whoa.
like, yeah, and it was like, dude, like let me take it. I want a better grade so I can go to college. Like, no, I don't care about this class. Like, yes, but that is very common. Like the naysayers of like prestige based like a thought process. They may be their own episode entirely. We may get to it is, and that's why 8 years later I'm now back in this process. I see the same basic thing. You know, yes, the students we work with are stressed out. There are a lot of stressed out students. The nature of college admissions and how we see it, I would definitely not call it healthy. And
Yeah,
like and as a general mindset.
that's a good point.
However. I lived through it, and felt a very different pressure, if on a slightly lower level, because I didn't have the grades, as I keep saying. But I simply, from day one, I refused to. I'm okay. I'm okay with prestige chasing. I think it's kind of neat, and you know what? It's if I was in high school again, I'd be trying to get into Stanford.
Hmm.
And like at my core, that's what keeps me up. That's what helps me sleep at night, as well as the fact that I work with student after student after student who do this process. And some of them do, unfortunately, it's too much for them, but they're like in the minority, I would suppose. And even I've never had a student who just says, like, I wish I hadn't done it this way. I, it is not the parent, like, sometimes the parents have a lot of oversight, but like in general, students want to get into these schools. But I work with them for hours and hours and hours. They are not been brainwashed. They are not, and they're not miserable about it. They're stressed about it, and it can be very difficult. But at no point is there. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with a student, except one who's having very real, honestly, like mental health issues about it. But like, is this a
Right.
good idea to be doing it in the first place? It doesn't come up. And again, that might be because I attract and recruit a certain type of student. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's if anything, I've hardened in my stances on it that like this is the game. Like I don't know, and yeah, at some point there's an entire argument. It's like, should this be the game? I don't know, but that's a much bigger conversation that I tend not to think about too much. Like I don't care that much.
Yeah. You're willing to play the game.
Yeah, I play it, and a lot of it I did play it, and like I played a slightly modified version because you had to be the leader of 9 clubs back in the 2000s. How you got into Harvard,
Right.
and
Right.
I clearly remember being in high school and having. And it's the same stuff I see in Why Prestige. I get kind of hard about it. It's like I just remember like people who thought they know better than me, and my parents basically telling me that I was being foolish for seeing the world this way, and being real and mostly just ignoring them because like, oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm gonna change my entire life philosophy and what I'm doing as a teenager because you random teacher I don't respect very much told me otherwise.
Yeah.
That was kind of
Exactly.
what I said, but that is still the case. I promise you. And like why prestige is such a controversial topic is because there are so many well-to-do people that want to tell these teenagers that they are idiots or they're wrong for wanting it in the first place.
Hmm. And then there's like this whole other component kind of coming into play with shaping perceptions of prestige is like the college rankings. So there's of course the US News and World Report. That's the one that's most widely used for higher education. So like if I just go through and scroll through and look at like the top few, we've got Princeton, MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Caltech, basically all of the ones that you kind of mentioned earlier. So I mean, what do you think of having this whole like ranking system and it's basically influencing how the public perceives a school's prestige?
I've thought a lot about the U.S. News and World Report rankings. It's kind of fascinating
Yeah.
that some trade industry magazine that like the U.S. News World Report is a magazine, is and 90% of the people listening don't may not know what a magazine is anymore. But like I was into magazine culture. I got video game magazines and football magazines and all and on and on and on. And the vast majority of them have been just completely lost to time. As like magazines go.
Right.
And the U.S. News Report, no one buys the U.S. News Report magazine.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I don't get it
understand
in the
it.
mail.
They used to rank all sorts of stuff. It was like the top 50 cars. It was the top 50 like vacation spots. Like that was part of their deal.
Oh,
The
okay.
U.S. News
Yeah.
World Report, like what they were and presumably still are, was I guess almost a version of like the Michelin star system, right? It was a
Okay.
magazine that ranked things that weren't necessarily ranked very often. That's my understanding of. But here we are in 2025, and like the U.S. News World Report is still a thing
That's what I'm
exclusively
saying.
because of a annual listing of colleges that they and that's like that has to be like the biggest driver, because they've expanded into major rankings. Like
Yeah.
what a weird industry. So what if the News Report like never exists or it doesn't exist? It would just be replaced by some other list that would probably make more sense. And there's a half dozen lists. And if you look at them, they're more similar than not, quite honestly.
Hmm.
Or the key is you look at me like, oh, this list is stupid. Like it says that UC Berkeley's the number 3 school in the country. That's funny. And if you've ever done that, you understand why these lists are real. Because like if you've ever been like, oh no, this is adding liberal arts colleges and telling me that Haverford is the 19th best school in the country. This is ridiculous. This entire list is a fraud. And then you
Right.
click out. If you've ever done that, and I certainly have, well, you are inherently agreeing with the fact that lists are real, because if they weren't, then you could just put any other list. You'd be like, oh, interesting. Like
Hmm.
Johns Hopkins number 1 this year. Like no, prestige is real. If
Yeah.
especially going back to my take on it, at least as like public perception of what a school's value is worth is absolutely real. But let's say you like lists are all banned. No more lists. Like they come into your house and they take our lists.
They
um,
came for the lists.
they came, yeah, yeah. First they came to the list, and that I had nothing to talk about my podcast.
Right.
Well, okay, let's say there's no list, all right, and like the lists are all gone. The following schools are still the following schools: Harvard, Princeton, MIT, Caltech, Stanford, Wharton, Yale, Columbia, Duke. Duke falls a little bit. Penn, Brown, Dartmouth, Hopkins falls a little bit. Chicago falls a lot.
Hmm.
Northwestern falls a little bit. Vanderbilt falls a good amount. Notre Dame stays the same. Cornell stays the same. SoCal stays the same. Rice falls a ton. Carnegie Mellon falls, stays around the same. Georgetown probably goes up. Berkeley and UCLA probably go up. And I'm just making another list in my mind.
Right.
This is now a list of prestige in which
There
here we
is no
go. Here we
list.
go. Here we go. This is a list of prestige in which the list itself is not influenced by the U.S. News World Report's inherent rankings that have caused schools to go up inherently in the prestige mind of others. And I'm so deep in this game, and this is why this is a fun topic. And the fact that I could just pretty casually go down the list and yeah, Berkeley and UCLA would probably go up. They would be seen as better than they currently are. Like the big losers would be Rice, U Chicago, probably Vanderbilt wouldn't do very well for itself. Vanderbilt would do okay. Rice, U Chicago. Yeah, and the big winners would be, I think Georgetown would actually be a winner, because they'd be like, oh, because then it's back to like, I think people would think if Georgetown was just like at the top 10 school in the country in the News World Report, people believe it's Georgetown. Like I don't know, I was like
Mm.
it's very prestigious. Um, yeah, this is fascinating actually. Michigan would be, I have no idea what happened to Michigan because it's a state school. NYU would probably benefit. Washington St. Louis would be dead in the water.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, imagine Washington St. Louis, what that school is if the News Reports never told you that that school matters.
That's so
Um,
true.
Virginia, I think, would probably be about the same. Georgia Tech would probably be in the gutter as well, I guess. Although Georgia Tech is actually kind of in the gutter. I move it up in my own rankings because I like it. Um, Tufts would probably move up a little bit. Emory would be about the same. Yeah, we keep going, but that's the idea.
Hmm.
Yeah, that thought experiment was fascinating. That, like even in, like if I that's why they came for the list. Oh my god, they're coming for, like I would get in trouble. So like there is no solution to this problem. Like ban the U.S. News Report. Like great, but like even if you
Right.
want to go a step further and like you really do like no list for anyone, bro. It's the Ivy League. Like the Ivy League is a list in of itself. There are certain schools, and I think a lot of it is that the User Report, they do a better job than not. Like I actually, there's a piece I wrote called the Matt T50, which I will almost certainly bring back. We'll probably do it together. It was one of our last episodes in like this year we've been doing them. I did in August when the User World Report comes out, and I did my own rankings. And it would probably be due time for me to shuffle my schools here. And in doing them, I mostly agreed with the U.S. News World Report. Like that was my big
Hmm.
takeaway is that there were some tiny movements, but those were basically based on like small sample size. I had a student who really liked Caltech. A student picked Caltech over Stanford, so I moved Caltech up. But that's like about as small a sample size you can get. Like Stanford's still king over Caltech just because I had one student pick it over it. But as when I got down to where prestige, this actually where prestige really gets kind of wacky is when you get below the top 20 or top 25 or 30 top schools because all the Ivies and schools like Georgetown and SoCal and Notre Dame and Vanderbilt, they don't need a list to be prestigious. They are and I don't know if that's why they're also high up on all the rankings. But
Hmm.
there's certain name brands in college admissions that aren't going. There's no list for like football franchises. Well, there absolutely are. They're called power rankings. But like there's like prestige exists in other realms. How about we go in that
Okay.
idea? And not all of them are so controversial because it's not about the future lives of like what 17-year-olds should care about. But
Yes.
in any market that there is multiple options, you can just talk like throw out a random consumer item. Like I could probably help you build a tier list of like amusement parks. Like Disneyland is more prestigious than Great America. You could think of any cars. Cars is a really great example, and there are lists
Hmm.
of those, but I don't know. I've ever seen them. Yeah, like Audi and BMW and Mercedes Benz, like those are prestigious cars. And I say that as someone, and if I was going to buy a car, it would probably be helpful for me to look at the list and I'd be like, oh, apparently this car is good. I'm sure I could find an 8-part Malcolm Gladwell podcast about how it's like completely ludicrous how they come up with this. Like, I don't care, I just want a car. So like
Right.
that is I don't think these lists define prestige so much as prestige is heavily influenced into how they're already built, which could be convenient and helpful for families that may not know as much as like I do already about like what they should be looking for.
And then, okay, so exactly like what you were talking about, like if the list didn't exist, who would know about WashU? So that kind of leads me to colleges that are kind of gaming the list.
Mhm.
Most famous is probably like Northeastern, for example. So, I mean, if they're actually working towards moving up their ranking, like they're doing things to actually game it, I mean, then what's the inherent use of this list? Or is that ethical for colleges to do?
Well, there's a evergreen episode about U Chicago we did that will show up at some point when I'm sick and miss a session. But yeah, I well in the last year, my concerns of that were uh, altered in that the U.S. News and World Report didn't like being gamed by schools like Tulane and Northeastern and everything, and they do control the formula, and that's why there's like two types of prestige. There's real prestige in the top 25, which we talked about. Then there's a second half, which is. And that was when I was doing my top 50. It became almost like comical. It's like, well, is UR Seattle more or less prestigious than UC Irvine? And I went, neither are prestigious. Like prestige is the idea of prestige has a limit, and like yeah, probably like is Boston. I say Boston College is a joke. Boston College is the least prestigious school in America that is still technically prestigious. I would say,
Okay.
and yeah, you could throw it up like Emory's in there, like Tufts. Like there is like a border, and it's not like it's a cliff at the bottom. It's like the beach of it. I was like, yeah, BC or um, yeah, Tulane's not prestigious at all. It's just not. And this is almost going into the second half that what's really interesting is where I think these lists falter and where they're exploited is the idea of I clearly remember I get into Tulane. My mom asked me or nervously checking what number on the U.S. News World Report Tulane University was, and I think
No way.
yeah, totally. I think about that, and it was like 49th, and she went, "Okay, good, that's fine, you can go there."
Oh my gosh.
And this is the other half of prestige in which uh, I think for the same reason that the top half like isn't changing and this isn't that big a deal. My mom knew that my mom wanted me to go to Vanderbilt or USC. Like she knew about those name brands. But then we get into the second half in which there were about there's like 3,000 schools in America, and you and I focus and only talk about 25 of them, for better or for worse. Well, that's where the game gets interesting. Is like most people either can't or are not going to one of those top 25 schools. They are instead picking one of these 3,000 other schools in America.
Yeah.
And that's where prestige, I actually believe, become like the concept of it becomes way more prevalent, but also much sillier. And you can see it in the UC system is that like you would consider it a true dummy dum dum to voluntarily go to a UC Merced instead of a UC Davis or go to Riverside instead of Santa Barbara. But if you get into Santa Barbara and San Diego and Davis, you probably want to go to. It was Santa Barbara at one point. Now probably San Diego. Santa Barbara and San Diego bounce back and forth at the most prestigious
Right.
second tier UC. That stuff totally matters, and that's the exact type of stuff that families are really talking about. And I will totally humor that. Like, you're right. Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, no, don't go to Riverside. Go to, it's better. It's better.
Better.
Which you like just on its face, that's completely farcical. It's the same thing. It gets even more farcical. It's like, well, should you go to UC Santa Barbara or Tulane? And then I would really be that one. I'd be like, you should go where you want to go, because like they're both the same level of prestige, which is neither. However, somehow are both way more prestigious than UC Riverside. So like, riddle me that. How can a school both be not prestigious at all objectively, but also way more prestigious than another school? Because that is how it feels.
Right.
And that is why the game in the rankings, like, I totally get it. And if I were suddenly in charge of, let's just pick the University of Tennessee, say, when I scroll down near the bottom of this, where I stopped adding schools because it didn't matter. You goddamn right, we're trying to game those rankings as hard as humanly possible. Like, that would be my game, because I know what Northeastern is. I know what Case Western is. I already knew what Tulane was, but I really know about it now. I know what Auburn is, which is like the double A minor league version of all this. I know what Boston University is. These schools that have gamed the rankings, they have objectively been heavily rewarded for it, if only because they are now a known option in the college admission space.
Right.
This is getting into like real weird brand marketing stuff, but like I was in marketing, and like simply having people know your school exists and like have a decent idea of what kind of product they offer is maybe 70-80% of the battle in
Yes.
in this podcast. Like, that's why there's TikToks. Like, we're just trying to get people to like see. Oh, by the way, there's a YouTube. Like, go to my YouTube channel and call it Mattie. Like, yeah, like that is what we're currently doing, like, desperately. Is like that is the hardest part when you are a new product or an unknown product, is just having people know you exist. That if they want a theoretical item, let's say undergraduate university, that Northeastern is a school that exists in Boston. Northeastern, oh, it's in Boston, and like, it's kind of prestigious now. Like that.
Yeah.
That is huge. It's huge. And it's also free marketing. And like, that kind of stuff is what sticks out to me of why I'm okay. The downside is I worry that those schools got in before U.S. News Report kind of figured things out, because that was the big update the last year, is that they shoved it, and suddenly Tulane falls to, I think, like 59th or 65th or so. Northeastern falls down, and basically it was all these schools that were playing the game. Okay. The U.S. News Report altered their rankings, and they all got kicked in the teeth, and now they're down. And
wow.
The question, but here's the thing: I don't know how that directly impacts. Yeah, that's like, I don't know how that directly impacts those schools' ability to attract students, because people still know what Northeastern is. They still know what Case Western is.
That's true.
Like, the move worked insofar as they are now they're in that relevant tier of schools that students apply to, and a lot of it's because of how they game the system. Students will apply to Northeastern because they don't require an essay, and it's free or whatever. And I see it, and I let them do it because I don't care. And my students don't ever end up there because they get into schools they want to go to more, but not everyone has that. Not everyone has that path through college admissions, and that is how you end up with, like, there are students who fall through the cracks, or I think probably in a common scenario is they're going to have to go to their state school. They don't want to go to their state school, and now they're like, well, I got a Northeastern. That's the best school, and that's how you get, like, surprisingly excellent students at your school. Like,
yeah,
it's not just about having more people apply or being seen as better. It is actually leading to a higher quality of student paying a lot of money to go to your place.
Right.
So that is the paradox of prestige. That I would say, like, what's the school? Pepperdine University is not, Lehigh is not a prestigious school in any way whatsoever. However, it still is much more prestigious than Santa Clara University. Isn't that weird?
That is weird.
Yeah. How can both of those?
But I can totally see that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, every school is more prestigious than Santa Clara University, but that's entirely different. It's a different game.
Okay, so let's talk about, like, is there actually any tangible impact of going to a prestigious institution? So there was this research that came out in 2023. It's Raj Chetty, David Deming, John Friedman. They crunched a bunch of numbers, and there's going to be a chart. You're going to see a chart. Okay, so this is basically the conclusion of their research. So I'm just curious to hear your take on this. So your chances of earning in the top 1%, if you go to an Ivy or an Ivy Plus, which they say Stanford, MIT, Duke, or U Chicago, okay, you have a 19.4% chance of earning in the top 1%. If you go to your flagship public college, it's 12.1%. Attending an elite grad school, 11.7 versus 6.2. Working at a prestigious firm, 24.5 versus 8. So, do you think that like this hearing this is does this move the needle to like say, okay, you have to go to prestigious institution?
Right. Well, I'm sure I could find you a counter chart that shows the correlation causation problems with these numbers, and is like, well, yes. However, there's a counter example of they track students who got into, I believe it was Princeton, and then they track but didn't go, and they had the exact same rates of success as their peers.
Exactly.
And that's why this is the war that rages on. And it's a piece I never wrote, but it was like does prestige matter? Is basically the question. And I believe that or like half it. It begins with like short answer, yes, you idiot. Duh, like yes. Does prestige does it matter? Yes, I bet going to Harvard's better than going to San Jose State. I bet it does matter. Is my that's the short answer. The medium answer is, well, it depends quite a bit. Like the data is, I think, more conclusive than not to support that. Yeah, like it does matter. And I think I've covered a lot of the medium answer, I guess, so far, is that I believe that the short answer though is, yeah, it's like, you, of course it helps. Shit, it's at Harvard, but yeah, all those people who go there, that are now desperate and spending millions of dollars to get their own kids in. I'm sure they're all a bunch of dummy dum dums that hated the experience. Like, get the f- out of here. Of course, prestige matters. Of course, you want to go to Harvard. It's just like, does prestige matter? Well, do you think going to Harvard is provides a better opportunities for your future career success than going to San Jose State? Yes, I believe it does. Thus, prestige matters. Like, I'm sorry, it just does.
Yeah.
The medium answer is, yeah, it's more complicated in the data, and that's why there's a war that rages. And over and over and over again, I'm more left with, I guess, more personal results or more personal takeaways. And I think I mentioned it when I got cranky again about the short answer, is that there is not this epidemic of people who go to these elite schools, these prestigious places, and then don't like, hate it. Like, it seems like when everyone's in bad talking prestigious schools, it's either like some very like, I'm like, like, I have millions of dollars, but I promise it's not that great. Like that
Right.
kind of concern trolling garbage I hate. Or just people being like, it didn't solve all my hopes and dreams. It's like, and I'm not claiming that they will do that either. It's usually younger students in the process that are either at the school and are very happy at it, or people who are right after like, wasn't that great? And I don't really care about their opinion, because like that's not. It's more, where are the adults? Where are the 45, 50, 60-year olds who went to these schools that are not just like, either like openly like noting it's not that big a deal, or probably what I really see, not, like basically not desperately trying to get their own children into the same or equivalent academic centers. Maybe that's more just like why prestige like rules on.
Yeah.
The data set is conclusive. Like, if Harvard or Stanford or Yale were not getting it done, like there would be a bigger understanding about it. Instead, there seems to be a quiet comfort of people who go there that is just like, yeah, it was fun. I learned a lot. And then and then I see on my end, they are more desperate, including my own parents. My mother attended Brown, my father attended Penn, and both of them wanted their children, who they raised to go to the most elite schools possible. And if it was Brown or Penn, that'd be cool. But it really is just like an elite school. My parents fell for, including my mom, fell for college admissions madness, as a lot of families do. And maybe that's why my views on it are so flavored by the fact that like part of my job is to tell parents like it's okay to feel this way, because that's also why I get heated about people telling them they're dumb the whole time, because like, sorry, like you can't change the way they're not going to change their opinion because you tell them it's not that big a deal, or you show them like the right chart about how like, but also your chart supports their theory. I got it. The long answer is pretty matter. It's a very difficult topic to address, because we can do it on the macro sense, and that's what the chart is. But on the micro sense, it's very difficult. Like, I went to Tulane. Here's my story. I go to Tulane, and I learned not very much there. However, a lot of that was because I had health issues and I wasn't medicated for my neurological learning disability. I then graduated Tulane, really not loving the experience very much, and I thought the English department was great, but I didn't learn. I then spent about 7 or 8 years kind of wandering through the wilderness and becoming a writer and working in marketing, which is not what I learned at school in any way whatsoever. Back in California, the fact that I went to Tulane did not matter, except there was a piece of paper as a 4-year degree. I then, around 29, re-get medicated for my condition. My health gets better enough that I can finally work my ass off, and I have a chip on my shoulder, and I decide to get a random job being a college consultant. I love it. I start a company. I learn how to do everything on the fly with the students I'm working with, including how to actually be an editor. I meet you. I go to your house.
Yeah.
Then like you also learn on the fly because that's
Yeah.
how I train people. Then I start a podcast, and now we're here. Michelle, I've never asked, where did you attend college?
U of A.
How did the University of Arizona impact your ability, like your life, the
Ooh,
prestige of, yeah,
that's a good question. Well, it's not prestigious at all,
right.
so no offense.
Tulane's not prestigious, but it's more prestigious than the University of Arizona, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, but did it matter?
I guess I think because like it didn't really come into play that I just never really thought about it. Like I couldn't use it as an advantage. So instead you just have to use what you have to try to get it somewhere in life.
Yeah, the line I say is like, there's some liberal arts college probably in America that is the best school I could have gone to, the perfect fit, sweetie. And it's a school I've never heard of, even though I'm a college consultant. And I say that, and basically, I that is because I go to that school and I meet, I don't know, I meet a professor who likes me and signs me up for, gets me into writing, and time and place, I suddenly become like the world's most famous nonfiction writer I always wanted to be. And that's, I'm living a pretty odd. It's probably like the bet, especially for 20, like 18-year-old me. Like that would probably be the dream. And even now, like that sounds pretty sweet. Like I don't know, making millions of dollars writing about dumb shit. That is the theoretical, like best way my life could have gone. I guess I don't know, but I'm very happy with mine having. But that the path I got here has nothing to do with where I went to college. So
Right.
that's why prestige is such a tricky concept. Is that what families are actually doing when they're trying to pick a school is trying to, I guess, guesstimate or like build the best possible arc for their child or for a student, like to give the best possible arc for where their life will go. And it's very possible I go to University of Penn or USC, and like it works better than Tulane, or I don't know. It's hard for me to in hindsight, like look back and like, what would it, if I'd gone to Harvard instead, would it instead have gotten all these incredible connections and like learn to learn better? And will my life be radically different or better? I have no idea. That's like, it's an incredibly weird theoretic, like, it's so hard to judge that. What I do know is what it was like where I went to school. And I know I went to a non-prestigious party school in New Orleans and pretty much hated it and didn't matter, which is why when it's eventually I will have little Zoomer juniors going to schools, and I will not want them going to Tulane because I think Tulane kind of sucked. Like that's the best I can tell them. But even here, as a college admissions consultant, now what am I supposed to do about like, well, where should you go to school? Because my kids will hopefully listen, and I'll go, well, Berkeley, UCLA are the best, the most prestigious California schools, so those are probably your strong options. And then, well, also like we have the financial ability to support you financially. Any elite private school I would like you to go to, especially ones that I view highly, like
Hmm.
but you're not allowed to go to WashU or St. Louis. You're not allowed to go to Emory, like schools that I kind of dunk on because I don't think those are actually good. And this is me as a professional college admissions consultant that does this over and over and over again. Then I'm like, but otherwise, like I don't know, Junior, like apply to a bunch of schools and figure it out. We'll go on the tour. So like when I'm imagining myself as a future parent, knowing like how not just like not I'm stressed I'll be, but how, or even laissez-faire, but like I don't know what school's best for my kid, like
Right.
and that's why these lists are so important for families. And that's if my student, and that's if my kid has like a 4.0 and a 1550. What if they don't? What if they have a 3.8 like me? Well, then I'm like, okay, which of these second, third, fourth tier schools makes the most sense? And like, I don't know anything. Like, I don't know, dude. Like that's why these lists are important. And like, that's exactly what happened to my mom, is like, she doesn't know these things. And like the vast majority of people of families applying to schools, they don't know nearly as much as I do. And even though I do know all these things, like I'm still admitting I will be kind of nervy and be like, ooh, what rank is what rank is Davis these days? It is a buyer's guide. Like that's what the Unis World War Report is.
Right.
And that's why this is the long answer. When you go back to the short answer, like of course it matters. Like I try to stand by the short answer. It's why this debate rages on forever, is that it is an impossible question to answer. It's much easier to answer why people care about prestige, and that goes back to the people who go to Harvard, they go to Stanford, they go to Yale, and then by definition, like then if their life goes pretty well, it is very easy for them to link back that yeah, Harvard, Stanford, Yale was pretty sick. And
Hmm.
I believe that, and I believe that to be the case more often than not, because I believe Harvard, Stanford, Yale is pretty sick. Like I believe the most elite schools in the country they do offer benefits that are impossible to, I guess, define. Like this chart's the best way to do it. Like yeah, you do get into grad school, you do
Right.
work at great firms. Yeah, the firm one, my Onion headline is like, I'm a CEO at a finance firm, and I'm here to tell you that Ivy League grads really aren't that great. I would know is I exclusively hire them.
Right.
Like, yeah, so like that's what I end up with is like cranky like jokes like that. I'm like, of course it matters, duh.
Yeah. So, okay. So, what about, okay, like I'm imagining parents are listening to you right now and they're like freaking out. Like, okay, my kid has
Oops.
to go to a
Oops.
prestigious school now.
No, you
So,
don't. I went to Tulane. I hated it. I learned nothing. And then I spent 7 years wandering in the wilderness. And now I'm the guy you're like listening to podcasts and like are trust enough to be nervous about.
I mean, like, how do you talk them down?
I don't professionally, quite honestly,
Okay.
because
Now they're like really freaking out.
well, families come to me with that sort of freaking out, and instead, what I do is I calmly, rationally explain like where they stand, and generally, they part of the freaking out is the student is a strong applicant, one way or another, and they have what they need, and and then I go, okay, yeah, like I believe that probably this top tier isn't looking that good, but I instead draw out where they stand, not what I don't do is tell them how they should feel about the process because well, I think from this podcast, you becomes like, that's not how I see it.
Right.
Instead, it's about, okay, how can I help you achieve your goals? And if that makes me a monster as a private consultant, that I'm in the interest of calming, like, and that does calm them down, by the way. Like the number one thing I do to calm them down is explain like what could happen, like as I see as you what they built so far, what seems logical or possible, and then start talking about like what's the plan of how we use what you've built to then achieve the goals that you are hoping for. And then I say
Hmm.
like I think we can get it done, and generally at the end of the consultation, what I often look for is like relief, like is like and I tell,
Yes.
and that's what a lot of all this is as well. Is like families are very nervous about, to be fair, like a very important decision. Like it really is several $100,000 to attend many of these schools, and it didn't matter that I went to Tulane. I think I blew it, and I wish I hadn't gone there. So it's not like I'm going to be sitting there with my students or with my own kids being like, it doesn't matter. I went to the school and like it was a mess and I figured it out. I was like, no, my life kind of sucked in my 20s, and a lot of it was because my college didn't help me at all.
Mm.
So it does matter where you go to schools. Yeah, prestige totally matters, dude. Like I'm sorry, like it's Harvard.
So basically, yeah, this obsession with like prestigious and elite colleges, it's never going to go away.
No, if anything, it's just going to get more intense, and that is one of the natures. What's happening with college admissions is as college continues to get more expensive, I think the risk of going to the wrong place or like the need to feel like you are getting your money's worth is simply going to increase. So I think that as college just in general is more expensive, like yeah, like that is just going to keep ramping it up, and those 25 schools I mentioned, they are going to keep being the top 25 schools. Like that is I guarantee you want to talk about the future college mentioned in like 10 years from now, there may be one or two schools that are in that top 25 that weren't there before. It wouldn't shock me if the Wash U's and the Emory's and like kind of your middle players that have moved up are back down in the mines. But
Mm.
yeah, it's like Harvard's going to be Harvard in 20 years. It's going to like Stanford will be Stanford. And I guess yeah, like there's a consistency to that, which I don't know if it proves that like these schools matter in the first place, but if they really weren't, at some point someone would be like, "Hey, like Stanford's not all that great. Like I'm gonna stop desperately trying to get my own kid in there." Yeah, it's a self perpetuating cycle in a way like that.
Well, this was a little bit of an unnerving conversation.
Why? No, no. Why was that unnerving? Because you said that, and I don't feel stressed when we talked about like timelines. I sat there being like, "Grr, this is so stressful." No, no. You as a parent who navigated this process, why especially, why is everything I say, would you say that's stressful? Because I don't consider it stressful. I consider it more just analytical of how I see things. And yeah, how's it stressed you out?
I guess I'm thinking of like parents or students who are thinking like, am I cooked if I can't, go for those prestigious institutions?
No, because prestige is bullshit. As I've been saying this entire episode, like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter at all. Like who cares? Just go to college. You're right. I remember the piece. Like that was how I never finished it. The fourth one is like, oh, it's like of course it doesn't matter. Like what are you talking about? Like I guess like my overall takeaway for parents or for families is you're allowed to care about prestige. Like you are allowed to look at these news rankings. And I especially think you're allowed to have them help you understand what schools are the more viable kind of outside that top tier. Because everyone knows that the Ivy League is good. Everyone knows that Vanderbilt is good. Everyone knows Notre Dame is good but Catholic. And that like, but there's that second, yeah, like after that, it does. Like it's very confusing and then it's very confusing about like what you should be doing with your time and resources and money, if only to know which schools to even be thinking about.
Right.
And I can sit here and say that especially for that tier, My overall views still more often than not match the U.S. News World Report 25 to 50. Like where I put them is different, and in doing so, I realize how farcical it is. But yeah, like it goes back to that like non-prestigious schools can be not prestigious but still more prestigious than others. I do not have a problem with families using that list as a way to build their their reaches, matches, and safeties. If
Hmm.
I agree with it enough, it matches my own perception, and if it doesn't matter, then you can still use the data that's telling you that it does matter. Like it should be fine, right? It's like, or you can just send your kid to Santa Clara, like whatever you want to do. Like it is not a Bible. Like it is not like, especially once you get below 25, it's really foolish to try to think that like 24 is better than 29 or 29 is or 33 is better than 50. That's silly. Like it doesn't work that way.
Right, right.
Yeah, but like does it actually matter? Yeah, in that I do believe having a UC Davis degree is going to probably be better than having a UC Riverside degree. Although maybe not, but also I guess one last feature about prestige is like I want students to be proud of the school they go to. I want them to be
Hmm.
happy with it, and that's not my fault with Tulane. I was happy to go to Tulane. I was proud to be there. I thought it was a cool school. I would not have felt that way if I attended. I don't know. Yeah, like UC Merced. Like I feel
Right.
like that would have bummed me out, and I would have felt like I did the process wrong, and I wouldn't have been proud to go there. I would have found it embarrassing. And I think that's maybe, and again, maybe that's why all those teachers that told me I was being foolish, I should have listened, but I never did once at all because my life, I'm going to think what I want about major decisions in my life. And I guess that's okay too, because that's what I tell students. Like, it's okay to want, especially if like there's a lot of reasons a student might want in a prestigious school. I think that's all
Yeah.
right also. But do understand that this process is tricky and it is complicated and it might not work out. That doesn't mean that you should be completely reorganizing your priorities ahead of time to prevent that kind of fallout.
Yeah. Well, that was an eye-opening convo today.
Thank you, Michelle.
See you next time.
Bye bye. I am now taking on students for the 2025-26 college admission season. If you are a current junior who's looking for help specifically with their college application and essays, you should check out my website. It's collegewithmattie.com, and there you can see my services, my blog with other written posts, as well as book out a free consultation where you get a chance to chat with me and see how I might be able to help. Looking forward to meeting with you.